Good afternoon. I want to call the Emergency Policy Group meeting to order. Before I turn it over to Mr. Dudley, I want to thank everyone for coming and being here as we are in a very serious situation at this particular point in time. So we want to make sure that everyone is clear about what's going on. I want to, before I start, introduce Chief Judge Figueroa. Glad to have you here, sir. Thank you very much. And Chief of Police Dugan, glad to have you here, sir. I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Emergency Management, Mr. Dudley.
Thank you, Commissioner. Tim Dudley, Director of Office of Emergency Management, Hillsborough County. I'm going to give you a brief overview of where we're at and our planning assumptions that we've executed thus far this week. Hurricane Dorian is currently 250 miles northwest of San Juan, Puerto Rico. It's expected to continue moving northwest until it turns more to the west tomorrow. Dorian will strengthen to a Category 3 or 4 major hurricane before making landfall Monday on the east coast of Florida. For planning purposes, the early or reasonable arrival time for tropical storm force winds across west central Florida is currently predicted to be very late Sunday night. The most likely arrival time is early Monday morning. Some of the protective actions that have been executed thus far: we've been posturing for a major wind and flooding event related to Hurricane Dorian. Possible actions: evacuation, transportation, and shelter operations. EOC activation level 2, Thursday through Friday, and we're looking at a full activation on Saturday in support of the shelter and transportation evacuation operations as needed. The state of Florida has begun the process of declaring counties. Government offices impact, potential closure impacts for next week. The storm continues to slow as of the last report. We have another update coming out at 5. Each report, it continues to shift, so we'll have further information on that. School impacts, potential closures for next week, also for consideration. Possible evacuation actions may range from mandatory evacuation for mobile homes, manufactured home, and low-lying areas. Worst case scenario, we'll be looking at a level A evacuation. We have 3 options we've been considering and for your consideration today. Option 1, no sheltering. If Dorian tracks away from us, sheltering may not be needed. Option 2, minimal sheltering. Sheltering operations for manufactured mobile homes and low-lying areas. Option 3, a level A. We'll be taking a look at 19 general population shelters, 2 shelters on standby for special needs. The population in the level A evacuation is approximately 266,794 citizens approximately. And this may include hospitals, hotels, and other critical facilities that may be impacted. That is the worst case scenario, and we've been planning for the worst case scenario. We'll be at a level 2 throughout the weekend. We've been communicating with our municipal partners and our other partners, and we're ready to elevate the posture as needed. I will briefly turn this over to Mr. Paul Johnston to give a review of the executive order. Sir.
Good afternoon, group members. Paul Johnston, County Attorney's Office. You have before you paperclip together, there are 3 documents. The first document is the Executive Order of Hillsborough County Emergency Policy Group declaring a state of emergency in response to the countywide threat from Hurricane Dorian. This order basically declares an emergency so we can begin preparing for the imminent threat of the Hurricane Dorian. It implements the provision of our emergency management ordinance and emergency management plan. It calls for the evacuation of areas and zones as determined by the county administrator and emergency management staff that are required. Authorizes the county administrator to implement the procedures in the emergency management plan, and the authority is granted to him under the state statutes. The county administrator is empowered to waive all procedures and formalities required normally under normal conditions. And all emergency responsibilities delegated by the governor are given to the county administrator. Also prohibits price gouging and requires municipalities and county to coordinate their activities together, and implements and adopts the governor's executive order into this plan, and requires it to be taken effect immediately upon execution. The second document is the evacuation plan order. It is blank right now. It would be determined by the county administrator and emergency management staff what areas exactly need to be evacuated and the time sequence for those evacuations. The third document is the governor's executive order.
So at this time, we need to accept the declaration of state local emergency. That's what we need to vote on.
I'm sorry, sir.
What do we need to vote on at this particular point in time? What is it that we need to vote on at this particular point in time?
What we're asking you to vote on this time is the implementation of the executive order declaring a state of emergency.
Is there a motion? Motion by Commissioner Berman, second by Commissioner Kemp to adopt the emergency order. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, likewise, motion is adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Dudley.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Commissioner Berman, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to ask a question. If and when we do evacuate, just so there, have we got a clear communication plan laid out for how that's going to be issued, et cetera? Or is that in the order?
At this time, I don't believe that's in order, but we do have a clear plan on how we will communicate. We've stood up our Joint Information Center here at the EOC, and we've also been in contact with our municipal partners. So we'll be able to bring that body together to execute that
Okay. order. Okay. Thank you.
Mayor Lott.
Sure. Could you walk us through the first three options a little bit? And, because I'm assuming, I get in trouble for assuming here, but, option three, what would take place for that option to be executed?
So for an option three, we're looking at earliest arrival time will be around 12 p.m. Sunday. Once we go into the evacuation, we have to conclude around 4 hours prior to tropical storm force winds. That we're looking at tropical storm force wind arrival. So that would put us around 8 a.m. on Sunday. With a level A clearance time, we need about 24 hours to execute that. To get all the transportation built up. We've been doing our call down for all special needs. We've been putting out the public messaging and getting a sense of those who would need that transportation support. So we would need to start that evacuation around 8 a.m. Saturday during daylight hours. And it will take a full day for us to get those folks in place for a full level A evacuation. And at this time, one of the reasons it's given us enough room to shift that to a Saturday so it doesn't impact schools and government closures at this particular time. Also, most likely it's 4 a.m. We would need to have evacuation concluded, and this would be around 12 a.m. Sunday with some of the same processes that we would need to get those folks in place as well.
So if we step through option 1, 2, and 3, you know, I've got 3 down, I understand that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Walk us through when, you know, the timelines from 1 to 2 to 3.
All right, at this time, we're watching the impacts, and then based on the impacts, usually 48 hours out, they're having challenges determining the surge based on this storm. It's just too far out right now, and normally we can't get that prediction for surge at about 48 hours out, and that's what's kind of holding us in place right now. This looks like a high wind event at this particular point, and that's why we're looking at the mobile manufactured homes. But if we get if we hit that level where we can get those impacts, knowing what the surge is going to be, then that's when we start having those discussions about going into the full level A.
This is a king tide that's going to be occurring this weekend as well, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Commissioner Berman, you recognize.
I thank you, Mr. Chair, and Tim, you're doing a great job too. Are all the schools going to be the shelters again? I mean, all the shelters going to be
At
the
this
schools?
particular time, we're looking at a full school board inventory for sheltering right now. Anything that's not a school shelter, that's when we'll go into step-down operations, move into the secondary shelters.
Okay. You know, I think at some point we need to consider the school superintendent being on the EPG. They're such a critical component of safety for our citizens that, I mean, it's just an idea that maybe, Paul, you can think about how it would be, and Mr. Merrill, I don't know, but they're just a critical element of what we do. Thank you.
Absolutely. They're also included in our planning process as well, and we can take a look at that.
If we do
Also,
that, if we do that, it will be the chair of the school board.
correct. Also, for your consideration, Hillsborough County, we do have a large inventory of shelters. This storm is coming in on the East Coast, so we may have that potential for folks making their way here to Hillsborough County for sheltering operations as well. We've put that into our planning assumption as well. We can elevate the number of shelters that we have. We've been able to train over 800 county employees thus far for shelter coverage, and we've also been in communication with our municipal partners, so I think we'll have the coverage if need to elevate at that point.
Mayor Lott.
Sorry, one more question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Temp International, when would that decision be made to shut down incoming and outgoing flights out of Temp International? Has that been decided yet, or?
We haven't decided that yet. I haven't spoken with the TPA, but we're always looking at when is the arrival of the tropical storm force winds, and that's usually around 39 to 40 miles per hour.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognized.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, I know it's been brought up about the king tide, and you had mentioned storm surge, wind event. You said it would be looking at it as primarily a wind event. So are we looking at storm surge, wind event, and what about rainfall and flooding?
Absolutely. Right now we're looking at anywhere from 6 to 8 inches of additional rain coming into the area. Some areas are looking up to 12 inches that the state is reporting. We've had over 2 weeks of saturation here, so that's always an impact for us. Riverine flooding and the communities out there. So we're also planning for that, for those particular impacts. You can get into fallen trees based on that saturated soil. So we're working to have our damage assessment teams ready to go to respond to those impacts.
And just to follow up on that a little, it seems as though we're in a pretty saturated condition, that we've had a high amount of rainfall for this time of year, and that already the ground is pretty saturated. And can that play into this, or do we have expectations in terms of that?
Again, some of the impacts we could see, trees are a lot easier to fall, and we'll have those impacts for those type of impacts in our community. And then slow absorption of the incoming rain, which would cause a little bit more flooding than normal.
Thank you.
Mayor, yeah.
I just have a quick question. You talked about people, since it's coming in on the East Coast, more than likely that there would be evacuations coming our way. That wouldn't be any official evacuation. I mean, people wouldn't be coming over here in an official capacity.
No, they wouldn't, and not in a official capacity at this moment. We try to remind most of our citizens to go tens of miles, not hundreds of miles. So you may tend to have some of that evacuation where they may have family members. We do encourage citizens to seek family members and some other familiar places to them. But we just prepare in the event, but there's nothing official standing up.
So we wouldn't
host
be
shelter.
opening shelters. They would only be opened for our residents in this area
Correct.
and others. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to our county administrator, Mr. Merrill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you know, we've had prior briefings, and since the end of the last hurricane season, we've engaged in a full reassessment of all of our emergency management systems. We've done a lot to bolster our resources. We've rehearsed a lot. More importantly, we've really, I think, done a better job of reaching out to all of your staff as well as our neighboring counties so that so we can be more collaborative. And so I want to assure all of you that even though the decision-making is delegated to me, I'm committed to you that it will be with a lot of input from all of you. It won't be an insular decision, because that's not the best way to do things. And so expect that I may be calling you all, and we'll want your input. Our staffs, I think our staff is very well connected now. We've tested, and I think we're very well prepared, so just wanted to make that comment for you.
Thank you, sir.
Chef Cronister, you want to come forward, sir?
St. Petersburg.
Okay, there you have a fire seat.
Everyone loves fire personnel.
Sheriff, we've gone through the process of everything we need to do in accepting the emergency document. Is there anything you want to bring forward to say at all? Get your microphone and turn on there.
Not at this time, Mr. Chair. We're prepared. Appreciate you being proactive. You and the county administrator are already with the sandbags. As everybody knows, this area is extremely saturated, especially in parts of town and country in the south end of the county, with a lot more wind and rain coming. We know that's going to be our problematic area, so thank you for being so forward of a thinker, Mr. Merrill, and opening up the sandbags. That certainly will be a great help. Other than that, we've been doing a ton, just pushing out hillsboroughcounty.org, making sure our residents know to go there and get the collective message that we'll all be putting out for the city and the county.
All right, Stelly, anything else? Yes, sir.
I'd like to thank this executive body and all your staff thus far. We begin this thing on Monday. The EOC is in a partial. I would invite you on your way out to stop in and check in with the staff in the EOC and see some of the planning that they're doing. And thank you for your support.
Any questions of anyone else? Anyone else? Not, we adjourn.